Hello there Voltage Modular people, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to do a technical overview of my Midi Blackbox Area C. Yes, I did release previously a Blackbox Area C and now we've got ourselves a Midi version. That's the big difference between the two. Yes, there's a couple of extra bells and whistles on this which I'll talk about. Where this was a 16 channel version, this is going to be a 64 channel version, so you can actually control up to 64 instruments at the same time. I just happen to be using, going to use all the MIDI outs and bring it into Reason, and I'm actually controlling 64 instruments at this very moment in time. I've actually only got this set for 16 just for this particular video I'm actually doing. So for those who don't know Area C or don't know In C was done by Terry Riley back in the 60s. It's classified as, I suppose, as a minimalist bit of music. It's something I absolutely love, and I've actually absolutely loved building within Voltage Modular and within Reason. I've done Reason projects as well with it. What I've found though is you can end up building massive projects, and because of all the wiring and because of everything going on, it takes all the resources. There's not much left really for your sound design. So hence I made these particular boxes. So these are very, very efficient over what you would be using if you've done it sort of more manually, and allows you, as you can see in this particular case on the same system, I'm actually running 64 instruments being driven by this one box. So that's how resource friendly it is. So in C, and let me have a quickly just pull this down for you. There we go. So in C is made up of 53 phrases. What happens is everyone starts on phrase number 1, and then you randomly move forward and you play each phrase a random amount of times before you move forward. There's another little rule in, which is, of course, I've got 64 channels. I don't want one of them channels suddenly going, I'm going to play that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, and go zooming ahead. So I've got rules to say, well, if I'm still here playing on channel number 2, say my lowest one, well, my highest one cannot go above phrase number 5. It's going to be stuck there, and we refer to that as blocking, and you'd actually see that option on my device, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So this one's going to wait until this moves on to phrase 3, and then it'll be allowed to go into phrase number 6. And then eventually everyone ends up on phrase number 53. Again, on my device, you'll actually see it count up to 55. Simple reason is 53, everyone's meant to finish on 53, and you all play together, and then you all drop out independently. So the way I decided to do that is I could block everyone on 53, so everyone joins 53 at the same time. They then randomly go on to 54, what happens to be 53 again, and then they randomly drop themselves out and drop into pattern 55, which happens to be a blank pattern, so it's not actually going to play anything at all, but it's just the way it views it and it shows it on my device. So you already got really 53 phrases, so it is following that In C line, but you may suddenly think, but it goes up to 55, and now you know why it goes up to 55. And I seem to have lost my mouse. Is that on the right screen or not? Let's find out. Yes, it is. So let's have a quick zoom in this, so get this nice and big, he says, so we can see what's what. So this is obviously the In C. As I said, we've got ourselves 4 MIDI ports out, which will support up to 64 channels, because each MIDI port supports 16 channels. You can have it as 16 channels plus your pulse, or in this particular case, I'm saying to myself, use MIDI channel 1. So on port 1, MIDI channel 1, I'm using that as my pulse. So effectively, I've got a pulse plus 63 other tracks which I can then use. Effectively, I'm still using 64 instruments because my pulse is going off to a piano sound. Again, if you don't know In C, a pulse is a bit like a metronome in the background. It's a 1/8 note which is pulsing away. It helps drive the rendition, I think. Some people don't like the pulse. I know some people that when they're playing, doing In C, once things are running, they actually turn the pulse off. I actually prefer to have the pulse on, and I like a nice high-pitched piano sound. Getting the pulse the right level is quite important. I've probably got it a little bit too high here because I've got it set up for 64 instruments and I'm only actually using 16 for this demonstration purpose. So getting that volume level right is quite key, and it does really help, as I say, especially in the quieter bits of NC, of keeping it driving forward. But hey, that's something you can play around with and experiment with. Duration is actually to do with, it's in bars of how long we're going to be playing each phrase before we're going to randomly decide to move on. Your minimum can never be higher than your maximum, so it'll actually push your maximum up if your minimum is trying to go above the maximum, and vice versa. If I try and bring my maximum below my minimum, it'll bring the minimum down. My personal recommendation is make your maximum at least 4 times your minimum. So if my minimum there happens to be 4, which is actually really slow, I'd make that 16. Preferably put that at something like 32, and then you can have this at like 128 or something like that. It's by having such at least 4 times, it helps with spreading all the phrases out, and you've got more chance of getting a little bit of blocking. As I say, I'll talk about blocking a little bit more when we get over this side. So it does help with that. Below that, we've got ourselves some random velocity, so we're randomly adjusting the velocity, and these controls are what I refer to them as unlinked. I was being clever at one stage and trying to make things a percentage of 1 and linking them together, but what I found is by unlinking these controls, we can get drift. We can get a nice bit of drift going on. So what does this all mean? So our minimum amount, so our maximum velocity is always going to be at 127 because we're in the MIDI world. So what we can do is we can set what the minimum is going to be. In this particular case, I've had it set to 50. So that means I'm going to choose a random velocity anywhere between 50 and 127. The rate is, at the moment, happens to be 9 seconds. Let's turn up to say something like 10, make it nice and straightforward. So if I say that's 10 seconds, so every 10 seconds, I'm going to choose a new random number. And the lag is how quick am I going to be moving from what the existing velocity is to the new velocity. So it could be that I'm currently sitting on velocity number 60. My 10 seconds is up, so I'm going to pick up a new random number, and it's going to say, oh, my new velocity is going to be 100, say for instance. So every second, I'm actually going to move 2 steps towards that 100. So after 10 seconds, if I was on 60, I'd then be on 80, but I haven't met my target, and this is going to kick in and say, hey, go and pick another random number, which could actually go down lower, or it could go higher. And as I say, because these are loosely coupled, it gives things a bit more drift rather than jumping, say, I'm going to start playing really high and I'm going to play really low. So this is your preference of how you like to set these up. Again, when I'm ramping these up quite high, I have the rate on full, and I have my lag time around about the second mark, because I don't want things jumping too fast all over the place. Channels, it supports up to 64 channels. Spanner, that is, I wrote a utility called Spanner, and that's what this is in the middle. Let me turn off these other lights so you can just see what the spanner is. So it's like an LFO which is actually running. Because I'm actually currently using one of my channels, used MIDI channel 1, that would be port number 2, and that would be port number 16. And this data is actually being sent out on, say, so this would be channel 2. So channel 2, CC 15, I'm actually sending this piece of data out. And within reason, I've got all these, I think what's called an arcus set up, and I'm actually controlling each of them. So this is controlling this knob, and that knob in turn is actually controlling the pan of the instruments within reason. So you can use it for whatever you want. You know, it's just a bit of modulation which is attached to that channel, and you can then obviously go off and do what you want with it. Stop stops the process, so we can obviously suddenly hit stop and just stop the process. We can then start the process again, it'll just pick up from where it is. Reset, we'll obviously reset it right back to the beginning. We've got ourselves some simple lights just to turn on and turn off the eye candy if we want. Below is just a bit more information. The middle one's to do with the minimum phrase it's playing. So at the moment the minimum it's playing is 3. The maximum it's playing is 6, and the last phrase it chose, so during this random process, happens to be phrase number 5. I also send out the phrase information per channel on CC14. So again, if I was just to quickly whiz over to here, in fact, can I just zoom this in a bit? He says, there we go. So I'm actually bringing this CC data in again into Reason, and I'm actually just happen to be controlling this device so I can just see the phrase number. So this one here, so that's going to be channel number 3 is actually playing phrase number 5, channel number 4 is playing phrase 4, and so on and so forth, so we can see what's what. And I can obviously, with that phrase data, we can obviously control a number of things, as you can see on this particular one here, on this device here. Obviously, we're playing phrase number 6, and on phrase number 6, I'm actually sending this bit of CV data out within Reason to control another parameter on the actual instrument itself. So when this goes to 7, that'll be a different value altogether. So I can do different things with different phrases. So it's down to you what you want to actually do with that CC data itself. Blocking, as I say, the blocking is quite box standard. It means, as I said, this is one here, so actually it's probably trying to play number 7 and it can't go on to number 7 because we've obviously got a number 3. For a bit of debugging, if I double click this, it's actually going to move the lowest phrase. It doesn't actually move it on. What it does, it sets it up in such a way that when the clock internally goes around, it actually says, oh yeah, you're ready to move on to your next phrase, and randomly it moves it up a phrase. So obviously it'll free the blocking out. As I say, I had that there for testing, and I just left it in there, and I thought, yeah, it could be coming handy, especially when you're running really long ones, and you might see the blocking going on for a little bit too long. You might think, actually, I'll just clear that blocking just to help move it along a little bit. So there we go. That's my Midi Blackbox Area C. I hope I haven't missed anything out. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.